I've watched a lot of students struggle to make a smooth ice cream base, but it doesn't have to be that way. In this video, you'll learn both the traditional way and a much better and simpler way to make a really smooth base for almost any kind of custard.
Ice cream, he brought me ice cream, vanilla ice cream, imagine that.
Traditional French-style ice cream is made from a sauce called crème anglaise. Crème anglaise is also used in desserts like bread pudding and soufflés, and is a key component in a dessert called île flottante, which we'll make in a later video. So it's a great thing to learn how to make. And even if you don't have an ice cream maker, you can use the sauce for all kinds of other things. Or you can just drink a glass of it before you go to bed, like I do. It'll put you right to sleep. Crème anglaise is a type of custard. And custard is basically just a mixture of a liquid, typically milk and cream, that's thickened by mixing it with eggs and gently cooking it. The traditional method of making crème anglaise uses a technique called tempering. To temper, you scald your milk mixture, which means you heat it to a little under a boil, and then you take about a third of your mixture and you pour it into your egg mixture while you're madly whisking, and that warms it up a bit. And then you take that now warmer mixture and mix it into the rest of your hot milk mixture, and that heats it up the rest of the way. This works okay and is pretty quick, but it's easy to end up with lots of little bits of overcooked egg in it, which can ruin both the texture as well as the taste. And there's a much simpler method called the cold start method, where we mix everything together while it's still cold, whisk it together, and then heat it up gradually while stirring. Using this method, you'll get a better, smoother product every time. Okay, so let's get started. Here's the whole recipe. We start with 170 grams of milk, 510 grams of heavy cream, 120 grams of sugar, 60 grams of corn syrup, 6 large egg yolks, and 1 vanilla bean, which we'll split and scrape. Now, a real vanilla bean is going to give you a much more complex flavor than using vanilla extract or vanilla bean paste. But if you don't have vanilla beans, and they can be pretty expensive to buy, you can use either a teaspoon of vanilla or vanilla bean paste. Another advantage of this method is that I can measure everything into the pot at once. So rather than having to scale everything into separate bowls, it makes it very simple and easy. So I'm going to start by taking my milk and pouring it into the pot. Next I'm going to tare my scale, and then I'll pour in my cream. Tearing means resetting it back to 0. It makes it a little easier so you don't have to do the math. Now I'm going to tare my scale again, and I'm going to measure out my sugar, and then I'm going to put in my corn syrup. Now corn syrup is very thick, and it's difficult to measure into a separate container and get it all out. It's super sticky. So this is another advantage of putting everything together into the pot. You can just measure directly. When you're getting close to the 60 grams, you just need to slow down your pour a little bit. And if you put in a little too much or a little too little, it's not really the end of the world, so don't worry too much about it. You can be within a few grams. Now at this point, I need to put in my egg yolks and my vanilla bean. You want to always crack your eggs on a flat surface rather than on the side of a bowl, because if you crack them on the side of your bowl, you're more likely to end up breaking the yolks or getting little bits of eggshell in there. And now I'm going to separate my eggs. Some people like to take the yolk and pass it back and forth in the eggshell. This works okay. It's slower if you're cracking a lot of eggs, and you can break the yolk on the sharp edges of the shell. So I prefer to just do it by hand. Now I pass it back and forth between my fingers, and I like to pull off those little stringy bits called the calaisi that hold the yolk in the center of the egg. This is not really necessary because we're going to end up straining the crème anglaise anyway. But if you want to be extra fussy like me, you can pull those off. Just be careful not to break the yolks when you do that. And if you're going to save the egg whites for something like making a meringue, you want to be very careful not to get any yolk in there, because even a little bit of yolk will ruin the meringue. You always want to separate your eggs when they're really cold, because when they warm up, the yolks break a lot more easily. I'm going to go wash my hands and refrigerate my egg whites. We'll use those for a frittata or something like that later. Now I'm going to turn on my induction burner onto medium-low. I'm going to pop my eggs in. I break them up a little bit and mix everything nice and evenly with a whisk. It doesn't have to be perfect right now because you're going to be stirring this for a while, so it will end up evenly mixed. I'll include in the notes about different types of burners. Now I'm going to pull out a vanilla bean and split it with a paring knife, and I'm going to use the back of the paring knife to scrape out the seeds. Drop the pod in there as well so that we get all the flavor possible out of the vanilla. We don't want to waste any of it. If we were using vanilla extract or vanilla bean paste, we would put it in at the end of the cooking, because a lot of those aromatic molecules will evaporate out during cooking. Now I have two different instant read thermometers here that I'm going to show you. The first one is made by ThermoWorks. This is a really great thermometer. It takes less than a second to read the temperature accurately. They also make less expensive models that take maybe 3 to 4 seconds. I also have a thermometer here that's made by Fireboard. This is a really great thermometer as well. It's very fast. This thermometer can also track the temperature over time using a smartphone or a web browser. Both of these companies also make multi-port thermometers, and both of them will track the temperature over time with phone and web apps, so they're both really great companies. I highly recommend them. I'm just going to cook it on a medium temperature, and I'm going to continuously scrape to make sure that I'm getting all the egg off the bottom and the sides of the pot. And this will keep it from overcooking the egg that's touching the metal. It's best to stir pretty constantly, but if you need to leave it for a minute or two, it'll be just fine. Just make sure you don't overcook the egg. You can see that it's very thin right now, and as we cook it, you'll notice it visually thicken. And it'll get to the point where you can tell just by looking at it when it's fully cooked. But we're going to use our thermometer today to also check the temperature. We're going to cook the crème anglaise to a little above 180 degrees. Anywhere between 180 and 185 is fine. If you cook it too hot, you'll get a little bit of sulfur smell, like the smell of rotten eggs or a sewer. So we don't want that. All right, now you can see that it's getting much thicker. In cooking, there's a term called nappe, which is the thickness that we like to cook many sauces to. And we check for nappe by swiping the backside of a spoon. And if the channel that you make with your finger doesn't fill in too quickly, then that's an indication that you're ready. And to keep the ice cream extra smooth, I'm going to pour it through a strainer to get out any little bits of egg and any larger bits of the vanilla. Normally I would put the lid on to keep it colder as it's processing, but for the video today, so that you can see the whole process, I'm going to go ahead and leave it off. Now, this recipe calls for 36% cream, which is what you typically find in a supermarket. That means that 36% of what's in the container is fat. Professional kitchens often use 40% cream, which you can find at some grocery stores. I'll include both formulas in the comments, as well as at foodscience.org, with some more detailed instructions. And if you don't have a thermometer, you can check for nappe instead. But get a thermometer. It's also good to know that the colder a food is, the harder it is for us to taste it and smell it. So we really want to keep all that vanilla aroma in the ice cream. And now it's done. And we end up with a quart of beautiful, creamy, really nicely aromatic ice cream. And the last and most important step in making ice cream is to find some friends and loved ones to share it with.
I sat there waiting in that cafe and never guessed